we're not thinking effectively on acting in ways just to survive our habitat destruction, which is a mental problem. It's not a resource problem.
You are passionate about sustainability, particularly ocean conservation. How does your knowledge of technology and entrepreneurship shape your climate activism?
Yeah, you think, well, that's a long stretch, but I care deeply about the ocean and the climate, and they're connected, of course. What's interesting though, there's a lot of things you can use from entrepreneurship and the kind of training that I had to go through in science and engineering. In the sense, first of all, systems thinking. So systems thinking is imagining a problem and the problem space and the solution space in terms of the outer systems that you're embedded in. So if you think, well, what is the problem with coral bleaching, which is killing these is basically extincting huge parts of our biosphere right before us. That's a serious thing. And you say, well, that's a bad problem. We should make corals that don't bleach, or we should, whatever. Now that systems thinking says, no, the reason they're bleaching is because of temperature rise. The reason the temperature rise is happening is because of fossil fuel consumption. The reason fossil fuel consumption is still out of control is because of mass propaganda delusion. We're not thinking effectively on acting in ways just to survive our habitat destruction, which is a mental problem. It's not a resource problem. It's not a thinking problem. I mean, it's not a physical problem. It's a choice problem, a willpower problem, right? So now we think, well, from the systems point of view, if I want to save the ocean, we have to change the system that creates the kind of misguided policy that leads to continuing destruction of the climate and so on. And that means, for instance, working on AI that combats rather than contributes to the epistemological crisis. So it's a weird thing, but it's actually, in terms of impact, the highest impact thing some AI people can do today is to help keep us from going down this spiral of self-destruction based on mass delusion, right? So, and there are people working on that. So that's one way. Also, another thing is, you can think about the, I was a PhD, I was an academic, I love ideas, and you see a lot of ideas in the climate movement. Wouldn't it be cool if we could do this or this or this? But when you take an idea out of the lab and you make a company, you realize that the idea is only a piece of it. So let's say someone's like, I invented a way to, I don't know, store things, energy just a little bit better. Or I can clean up plastic with this machine or something like this. So these are all beautiful ideas. But if you think of it like a business person or entrepreneur, you think, well, the idea has to be embedded in a team at the right time, with the right resources, and the right guidance in a larger system, economy or political stream. That's what will create solutions to climate change. And in fact, we just saw a talk just last month. Al Gore gave a talk at TED, in which he said persuasively, look, we have all the technology we need today. We have all the money we need today. We just have to have the political will. We have to change. We have to make our decisions and act on them today. And that's an important lesson for all of us. But that's part of how I see, because that is what people do when they think about making a company, is like, how do I actually make it happen?
Fast forward several decades, how do you believe AI will shape our everyday lives?
Oh, so many good ways it can help us. First of all, I've used this word augmentation before. AI will be augmenting us in all kinds of ways. It's already beginning to augment us. Siri was actually an attempt to augment us in the sense that when we built Siri, the only way you could use the mobile phone is to tap on the tiny little screen. And of course, that's not easy for everybody. And also, at the same time, on the web, all kinds of cool things were available, like all these services you can do. You can do travel and booking restaurants and all these things you can do with Siri. Well, those things were only possible if you had 10 fingers and a big screen and an internet connection, right? So basically, we felt like we wanted to bring the bounty of all that to someone with a mobile phone, just their voice. Okay? Well, that's a kind of augmentation. That's like giving us the power of having the 10 fingers in the screen while you're carrying it around, okay? It's not as obvious as like eyeglasses, but it's similar. And now we see a lot more examples of how the AI is augmenting people overcoming disabilities. For example, one of the companies I advise helps people who can't speak because of neurological conditions, like Stephen Hawking had that issue, then the AI actually helps understand what they're trying to say by reading the brain waves and interpreting them as speech. And that wasn't possible before AI came along to help make sense of that. So there's a lot of examples like that. AI that can help predict whether you're going to have a migraine, and it can help predict whether you're going to have a psychotic breakdown. All kinds of things that AI can predict with enough data, then now you can use them to augment us. So that's one thing, augment. The next thing is essentially nurture. Now, nurture as in the sense of like a mother nurturing an offspring. You know, AI today is more like kind of like Big Brother. It's like, you know, we're oftentimes being used against people. But I like to think of Big Mother, like a big bear mother protecting her cubs. And so, you know, because there's a lot of dangerous stuff out there. But what does a mother do? A mother tries to use her skills to make you a better person, more healthy, have better self-care, better mental health care, better social interaction with peers, and so on. So that's what the AIs can do in the future. And I'm not just making this up as a fantasy. There's many real companies and projects working on that nurture goal, starting with just simple things like, you know, these wearables, watches and rings and all these kinds of things. They're starting to give us feedback about how well we sleep, for example. And there's lots of other games in play there. How well you sleep, how well you focus, all these things. And so AI can help with those. And the final thing that AI is going to do, I think, is going to transform society. It's already beginning to transform it in some negative ways, but I think we can turn that around. I think it's going to transform societies because a couple of things. One, AI can overcome differences between people that are unimportant. For, you know, as they say on the internet, you know, you can be any color, any gender, and so on that you want to be. There's no, when you're digitally interacting with people, your choices and your inheritance that way should be irrelevant, right? And also even things like your cognitive disabilities, whether it's kind of a spectrum emotional thing, or it's just IQ or things like that, these differences can actually be shored up when AI is in the middle and AI is mediating for you. And also, then there's a more subtle and important, even more powerful way that right now, we all kind of are individuals in our intelligence. And we show up and we try to make sense that we have this noise coming at us from the environment, and we're trying to make sense of, trying to survive, try to reach out to other human beings and connect. But really, we haven't really realized our potential as a collective yet, as society. We don't really think well together today. I mean, the only techniques we had for that was like the media and politics have been kind of completely transformed already, and disrupted is a better word for it. Those traditional ways in which we would collectively think have been disrupted in a serious way. That the one piece of collective intelligence that survives is science. Science as a process of knowledge creation and agreement, that still survives. And ironically enough, the way that AI advances the fastest is because of its use of the scientific method and so on. But the point is that there are systems of thinking together, like science, that do work, and those that don't work, like traditional politics. And so AI is actually going to play a big role in mediating many-to-many collaboration so that we can collectively think effectively together and solve some of these problems that we need to solve, like climate change and so on, that are based on mass delusion. You know, we need to be able to think better together, and then we can start addressing these problems.